Welcome to A Friend Remembers and a short video explaining why you should play Child of Light. So, in case you've never heard of this game before, it was made in 2014 by a small team working at Ubisoft. And this is not the kind of game that Ubisoft traditionally makes. In fact, the team that produced this game were originally the people behind Fallout 3, a big open world shooter survival game, and they used an engine that was developed for the 2D platforming Rayman games. And together between them they created what in their own words was meant to be a love letter to the genre of JRPG gaming. Now, this was a French team, and I need to come out the bat for this third video for the third game in the year of JRPGs. Child of Light is not a Japanese game. JRPG, although the J stands for Japan, in my personal, and this is a contentious topic, in my personal definition, J does not stand for Japanese. Just because a role-playing game is produced in Japan does not automatically make it a JRPG, and conversely, a role-playing game made outside of Japan is not necessarily not a JRPG. JRPG is about stylistic conventions, and it's something I want to explore throughout this year. This game is made in homage and uses many of the styles from the great Japanese role-playing games that established the genre early in mid-1990s. So even though it was produced by a French team, it is overwhelmingly using styles and techniques and systems that were popularized in the JRPG genre. Therefore, it's a Japanese style role-playing game. We'll come back to this topic in future videos. And once you've established that, the way it plays is it's 50% platformer. I say platformer, very early on in the game you unlock the ability to fly, and once you've unlocked that ability you almost never do any platforming then again. But the whole point of the game is you navigate your way across the kingdom of Lemuria as this young child named Aurora. As you fly, you can see and encounter enemies and bosses and monsters who are walking or flying or just traversing, hanging out and guarding things in this two-dimensional plane. Now, you can collect a lot of potions, you can collect a lot of buffs and items to empower your character up, and the more you engage in combat, the more your characters will level up. They'll increase their statistics to make them more powerful in battle and unlock new moves. So there is a good amount of exploration here. You do get rewarded for going off the direct path and exploring and finding these level ups, particularly if you play on the harder difficulty settings. Because although I wouldn't call this one of the hardest games out there, in fact on normal mode it's very rarely becomes difficult. If you do ignore this exploration and if you don't go and engage in every battle, although it's possible to go straight to the bosses and finish the game via the direct path, you will find it very difficult if you do so. You do need to explore a bit to actually make these bosses tangible. You will complete small, there's not many of them, but small sub-quests as you go on your journey, and you'll encounter people who join your team. In combat, you have 2 players in battle at any time, and once you've got a large enough team, you can switch out on whenever it's your go with an active character who's not been knocked unconscious. You can switch them out to bring any member of your team in to use their abilities. They've all got their own HP, they've all got their own magic, and they've all got their own special techniques. They're all very distinct, and I think it's a very well-balanced set of characters. The twist here is it's an active time battle system. That means that whilst every character has turns, there's a little bar along the bottom that fills up, and when it gets to the end of your turn, you have your go. Depending upon your speed stat, you have a certain number of goes, meanwhile the enemies, their own active time battle is filling, and they have a go. The unique twist in this game is that if you take an action and you manage to strike the enemy just before they strike, you can knock them back, you delay them taking their action, and you cancel their turn. This means that if you power up enough and you play the game strategically, you can bully certain enemies into never having a go. Just completely knock them down so they never have a chance to strike back at you. This can be really rewarding, although conversely, if you're not very good at managing the system, the enemy can also knock you back and stop you having a turn. So there's a strong risk-reward mechanic here, which I found really fulfilling. The second oddity of the combat, and this also applies to the main game when you're a platforming flying element in the exploration, is you can use, depending on the console you're using, you can either use a pointer. This game originally came out on the Wii U and other consoles, and it's since been ported to the Switch. You can touch the screen and control this little firefly who will move around, and if you hover them over an enemy, you will slow them down. The firefly will irritate them and make them progress to the next go more slowly, or if you hover the firefly over your own characters, you can heal them up. So there's another strategic piece of thinking here in terms of, is it better for me to use and there's a limited amount of magic that the firefly has, is it better to use the magic to slow the enemy down to prevent them taking as many turns, or to heal yourself to get yourself out of poor health situations without wasting a turn? That's a fantastic bit of strategic thinking. And in a twist to the game, often JRPGs are single player experiences. If you have a second player, you can give them control of the firefly. They can then have their own decision on whether they want to pester enemies or heal the main character independently. I would say if you had a young sibling or a young person who struggled with gaming playing alongside you, it's a good way to share the experience, but I suspect most players won't be using it in this fashion. The optionality of it there, though, is definitely a welcome feature. In the two-dimensional map, when you're exploring, you can use the firefly to activate switches or puzzles. It only really gets challenging at the very end of the game and the very last dungeon, where you're actually using the firefly to deactivate traps and then open trapdoors, and you have to navigate through these complex mazes where if you touch the sides of the mazes you get hurt, lose too much health, you're going to then struggle in the combat when you get to the enemies on the far side of the maze. It's a really satisfying game. It's also not a very long one. You can probably complete it in under 15 hours, maybe even 10 if you know what you're doing and are competent at the genre and don't whack the difficulty setting up too high. For a short, great experience and a flavour of what JRPGs control-wise are like, the story tells is based off a Romanian folktale, and you're playing as a princess from a dukedom in this ancient kingdom. It's definitely got a very Western feel. The music's orchestrated, it feels beautiful to listen to, and it's got a very Western fairy tale, Aesop's fable type feel. The one, I'd say, controversial thing is all of the dialogue, almost all of the dialogue, is written in rhyming couplets. Now, the core storyline is told by an omniscient female narrator, and it's told like a bedtime tale, but in the game, Aurora and the Firefly and the various characters you come across, they talk in rhyming couplets. Now, I was personally able to overlook this, it didn't bother me very much, but I've spoken to other gamers who found this extremely annoying, the way the dialogue had to contort itself to make sure every second line rhymed. And if that bothers you, it may put you off the game, but that is my only criticism on what is otherwise an exemplary Western JRPG experience.